Mark ran his fingers through his disheveled hair. He needed to leave now to pick up Emma, but the reports were due tomorrow morning. Catherine Wells, the newly appointed CEO, had made it clear that she expected nothing less than excellence from every department. Known for her strict management style and unwavering dedication to the company, Catherine had transformed Meridian from a struggling tech firm into an industry leader in just 18 months. The office had been buzzing with rumors about her. Some called her the Ice Queen, claiming she cared more about profit margins than people. Others admired her business acumen but kept their distance, intimidated by her formidable presence. Mark had managed to stay under her radar so far, but missing this deadline would certainly change that. With a heavy sigh, Mark gathered his belongings. Emma needed him more than the company did right now. He would have to work through the night after she went to bed. "Leaving already, Jenkins?" The voice from the doorway made Mark freeze. Catherine Wells stood there, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Wells, Mark stammered, feeling heat rise to his face. "My daughter's school closes soon, and I need to pick her up." Catherine's eyebrow arched slightly. "And the quarterly reports?" "I'll finish them tonight, from home. They'll be on your desk first thing tomorrow morning." Catherine studied him for a moment, her piercing blue eyes seeming to look right through him. "See that they are," she said finally, turning to leave. "And Jenkins?" "I expect them to be flawless." Mark nodded, swallowing hard as he watched her walk away. The woman's reputation for being ruthless was apparently well-deserved. By the time Mark arrived at Westfield Elementary, Emma was the last child waiting, sitting alone on a bench outside the principal's office, her small shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm so sorry I'm late, sweetheart," Mark said, kneeling in front of her. Emma looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "You promised, Daddy." The words cut through Mark like a knife. "I know, Em. Work got complicated, but I'm here now." Emma's teacher, Ms. Patel, approached them with a sympathetic smile. "Mr. Jenkins, could I have a word?" While Emma waited by the door, Ms. Patel explained that Emma had become increasingly withdrawn in class. "She's falling behind in her schoolwork, and today's panic attack was triggered when another student mentioned Mother's Day projects." Mark nodded, the familiar weight of guilt settling on his shoulders. "I'm doing my best, but balancing work and being there for her, it's harder than I expected." "Have you considered therapy?" Ms. Patel suggested gently. "The school has resources that might help." "We tried last year, but with my work schedule." Mark trailed off, aware of how inadequate his excuses sounded. "I'll make it work somehow." That night, after tucking Emma into bed and reading her favorite story twice, Mark sat at his kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets and financial projections. The numbers blurred before his exhausted eyes as the clock ticked past midnight. He thought about Catherine Wells and her expectations. The woman probably had no idea what it was like to struggle with real-life problems, to choose between being a good parent and being a good employee. The next morning, after dropping Emma off at school with promises to be on time for pickup, Mark arrived at the office early to place the completed reports on Catherine's desk. To his surprise, she was already there, reviewing documents with intense concentration. "Jenkins," she acknowledged without looking up. "The reports?" "Completed as requested," Mark said, placing the folder on her desk. "If there's nothing else, I'd like to discuss something important with you." This caught Catherine's attention. She set down her pen and gestured to the chair across from her. "Go on." Mark took a deep breath. "I'd like to request flexible working hours. My daughter is struggling since her mother passed away, and she needs more stability. I can still complete all my work, but I need to be able to pick her up from school consistently and be present for her in the evenings." Catherine's expression hardened. "Flexible hours? This is a critical time for Meridian. We're finalizing the merger with Syntec, and I need every department functioning at maximum efficiency. I understand that, Mark persisted, but I'm talking about shifting my hours, not reducing them. I'd come in earlier and work from home in the evenings if necessary. And what happens when we need you for an emergency meeting? When clients want to schedule late afternoon calls? Catherine shook her head. I'm sorry, but I can't approve this request. Not now. Mark felt a surge of anger. With all due respect, Ms. Wells, you don't understand what it's like. My daughter is suffering, and I'm failing her because of this job's demands. I understand perfectly well what this company needs to succeed, Catherine replied coldly. And right now, it needs employees who can prioritize their professional responsibilities. So you're saying I should prioritize spreadsheets over my grieving child? Mark's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from colleagues passing by the glass-walled office. Catherine stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I'm saying that I cannot make exceptions based on personal circumstances. The policy applies to everyone equally. That's not fair, and you know it, Mark said, standing as well. You've never had to choose between your child's well-being and your job. You've never had to wipe away tears because you were late again, or explain to an 8-year-old why daddy has to work instead of attending her school play. Something flickered across Catherine's face, a brief crack in her composed facade, but it disappeared so quickly that Mark thought he might have imagined it. This discussion is over, Jenkins. I suggest you focus on the Syntec merger data I need by Friday. With that, Catherine turned her attention back to her documents, effectively dismissing him. Mark left her office, frustration and helplessness washing over him in equal measure. He had hoped for understanding, or at least compromise, but Catherine Wells was exactly as rumored, cold, unfeeling, and entirely focused on the bottom line. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Mark avoided Catherine when possible, focusing on his work while trying to leave exactly at 5 to pick up Emma. He managed to make it on time each day, but the looming Syntec merger meant he had to bring work home, spending hours on his laptop after Emma went to bed. On Thursday evening, Emma had another panic attack when Mark mentioned he might need to work late the following day. It took over an hour to calm her down, with Mark promising repeatedly that he would never leave her. But Mommy said that too, Emma sobbed, clinging to him. She said she wouldn't leave, but she did. Mark held his daughter close, his heart breaking. Sometimes people can't keep their promises even when they want to, sweetheart. But I'm doing everything I can to be here for you. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, Mark made a decision. No job was worth his daughter's mental health. He would request a meeting with Catherine tomorrow and make one final plea for flexible hours. If she refused again, he would start looking for another position, even if it meant a pay cut. Friday morning brought unexpected chaos to Meridian Technologies. The Syntec representatives had arrived early for a preliminary meeting, and the entire executive floor was buzzing with activity. Mark completed his merger analysis and headed to Catherine's office to deliver it personally, hoping to use the opportunity to schedule their discussion. As he approached, he heard raised voices coming from the conference room next to Catherine's office. The door was slightly ajar, and Mark could see Catherine standing at the head of the table, surrounded by the Syntec executives and Meridian's board members. "This is unacceptable," one of the Syntec representatives was saying. "We were promised complete transparency, but these numbers suggest Meridian has been concealing significant losses in the Asian market." "Those losses were disclosed in the preliminary reports," Catherine replied calmly. "If you review Appendix C." "We've reviewed everything," the man interrupted. "And we're not convinced. Either you're being deliberately misleading, or your financial team is incompetent." Mark froze. His department had prepared those reports under his supervision. If there were errors, the responsibility fell on him. "Neither is the case," Catherine stated firmly. "My financial team is exceptional, and I stand by their analysis. The Asian market showed temporary losses due to the regulatory changes we discussed last month, but the long-term projections remain positive." "So you say," another executive chimed in. But we're not willing to proceed without additional verification. We want an independent audit before moving forward. That would delay the merger by months, Catherine pointed out. Surely we can resolve this without such drastic measures. The tension in the room was palpable, and Mark knew he should walk away. This wasn't a conversation he was meant to hear. But as he turned to leave, he knocked against a nearby cart, sending several coffee mugs crashing to the floor. The noise drew everyone's attention. The conference room door swung open fully, revealing Mark standing there amid broken ceramic and spilled coffee. "Jenkins," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Is there something you need?" All eyes turned to him, and Mark felt his face flush with embarrassment. I have the Syntec merger analysis you requested," he managed to say, holding up the folder. "Perfect timing," one of the board members said sarcastically. "Perhaps Mr. Jenkins can explain the discrepancies in the Asian market reports, since he's apparently been listening to our private discussion." Mark stepped forward, confusion evident on his face. "Discrepancies? I personally reviewed all those numbers. There shouldn't be any." "There aren't any discrepancies," Catherine interrupted. "There's a misunderstanding about how we've categorized certain regulatory impacts. If you'll allow me to explain." "We've heard enough explanations," the Syntec representative cut in. "What we need is honesty. If Meridian can't provide that, perhaps we should reconsider this merger entirely." The room fell silent. Months of negotiations, countless hours of work, and the company's future growth all hung in the balance. Mark looked at the faces around the table, the board members' concern, the Syntec executive's suspicion, and Catherine's carefully controlled expression that nevertheless couldn't hide the strain she was under. In that moment, Mark made a decision. He stepped fully into the room and placed his folder on the table. "If I may," he began, opening to a specific page of his analysis. "I believe I can clarify the issue." For the next 20 minutes, Mark walked the room through his detailed analysis of the Asian market situation, explaining the regulatory changes, their temporary impact on revenue, and the recovery already beginning to show in the most recent data. He used charts and projections to demonstrate that what appeared to be losses were actually strategic investments in compliance that would yield significant returns within 2 quarters. As he spoke, Mark noticed Catherine watching him intently, something unreadable in her expression. When he finished, the room was quiet again, but the tension had dissipated considerably. "This is quite thorough," the lead Syntec representative admitted. "Why wasn't this level of detail included in the original reports?" Before Mark could respond, Catherine spoke up. "That's my responsibility. In an effort to keep the reports concise, I asked for certain details to be condensed. Clearly, that was a mistake on my part." Mark stared at her in surprise. Catherine Wells was taking the blame for something that wasn't her fault. The condensed format had been a directive from the board, not from her. The meeting continued for another hour, with Mark answering technical questions and Catherine skillfully steering the conversation back toward the merger's benefits. By the end, the Syntec team seemed satisfied, agreeing to proceed without an independent audit as long as they received the detailed analysis Mark had presented. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Catherine touched Mark's arm lightly. "My office, please," she said quietly. Mark followed her, expecting either gratitude for saving the meeting or reprimand for eavesdropping. Instead, Catherine closed the door behind them and said something that caught him completely off guard. "I lied to you, Mr. Jenkins." Mark blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry." "When you asked for flexible working hours," Catherine continued, moving to sit behind her desk. "I lied when I said I couldn't make exceptions to company policy." Mark remained standing, unsure how to respond. "I don't understand." Catherine sighed, suddenly looking tired. "The truth is, Meridian has no policy against flexible working arrangements. In fact, we've approved them for several employees in other departments." "Then why," Mark began, feeling his earlier anger returning. "Why did I deny your request?" Catherine finished for him. Because I needed to see if you were committed enough to find a way to make it work regardless. Mark stared at her, bewildered. You were testing me? My daughter has been suffering while you played some kind of management mind game? It wasn't a game, Catherine said sharply. It was a necessary evaluation. The Syntec merger is the most important deal in this company's history, and I needed to know if you could handle the pressure of leading the financial team through it while dealing with personal challenges. So you deliberately made those challenges harder? Mark's voice rose in disbelief. How does that make any sense? Catherine was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing an invisible pattern on her desk. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its usual commanding tone. Because that's exactly what I had to do. Something in her manner made Mark pause. He sat down slowly in the chair across from her, waiting. What you said the other day, Catherine continued, about me never having to choose between a child and my career, you were wrong. She reached for a small silver frame on her desk that Mark had never noticed before, turning it so he could see the photograph of a smiling teenage girl with Catherine's eyes. Her name is Lily. She's 16 now, but when she was 9, her father died in a car accident. I was a junior executive at my previous company, working 80-hour weeks trying to prove myself in a male-dominated industry. Lily needed me, but I was convinced that if I showed any weakness, if I asked for accommodation or special treatment, my career would be over. Mark listened in stunned silence as Catherine continued. I hired nannies, enrolled her in after-school programs, did whatever I could to maintain my work schedule. I told myself I was providing for her future, that the sacrifices were necessary. Catherine's voice grew softer. By the time she was 12, Lily was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. She started therapy, but it wasn't enough. One night, I came home to find her in the bathroom with a bottle of my sleeping pills. Mark felt a chill run through him. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Catherine nodded, composing herself. She survived, thankfully. But that night changed everything for me. I realized no promotion, no salary, no corporate success was worth my daughter's life. I quit my job the next day and took 6 months off to focus solely on Lily. What happened then? Mark asked. We healed, slowly. I found a new position with a company that valued work-life balance. I set boundaries I never would have dared to before. And when I eventually became CEO here at Meridian, I promised myself I would create a culture where no parent would have to make the choice I almost made too late. Mark frowned, confusion evident on his face. But that doesn't explain why you denied my request. Catherine leaned forward. When you came to me about your daughter, I saw myself 7 years ago, dedicated, hardworking, trying to do it all without asking for help. But I also saw something I didn't have back then, the courage to actually ask for what you needed. I denied your request because I needed to see what you would do next. What I would do next? Mark repeated. Yes. Would you accept my decision and continue struggling in silence? Would you look for another job? Or would you fight for what your daughter needed, even if it meant standing up to the CEO? Catherine's lips curved in.